Welcome back, Mitchell Mustangs. Happy Monday, April 20th. So we will be working again this week in our online classroom platform. Each day, your language arts teachers and I ask that you view the video, think about the mini lesson, then read 31 minutes in your independent reading book. After that, write a reader's response. Make sure to look at your rubric to help you as you craft your responses. At the end of the week, please, your language arts teachers and I cannot wait to see your emails come in where you send us your self-score and also send us that one writing piece that you have scored so that we can read it. We want to see what books you're reading. We want to know what you're thinking. We want to look at your writing. So we look forward to hearing from you at the end of the week. And remember, on Fridays, Dr. Skeen does her writing workshop lesson, and it's an awesome enrichment opportunity for everyone to participate and strengthen your writing skills. So, before we get started, Ms. Rivero had a great idea. You'll see behind me, I have this awesome riddle, and this is from Ms. Rivero in LC9. And it was her great idea to offer you a riddle, and then on Thursday, I will let you know the answer so you can think about the riddle all week. So this riddle is, I am a ball that can roll, but cannot be bounced or thrown. What am I? So that's the riddle from Ms. Rivero. So have fun thinking about that, and I will let you know Ms. Rivero's answer on Thursday. So as I said last week, Charlotte's Web, oh my goodness, what a classic, what an awesome book. It was so well written. We're starting a new book. So this is Holes by Louis Sachar, written in 2003. 2003, I think it is 2003. I'm saying that correctly. It might have even, actually, no, 1998. So I think the movie was in 2003. So this book was recommended by Dr. Skeen and Ms. Bajois in LC6. So great readers, something that we always do is when we love a book, we recommend it to our fellow readers. If we love a book, we want someone else to read it and love it. So Dr. Skeen, Ms. Bajois recommended that we do this for our read aloud, and I thought, oh my gosh, I love Holes. I did read this a long time ago, and then actually went and saw the movie in the theater. That's what I was thinking, 2003. So I'm so excited to read another fiction book together and think through it and share our strategies as we follow the plot structure, because this is another fiction book. Wondering what type of fiction. And so as a reader, I might read the back before I get started. Holes by Louis Sachar. Stanley Yelnats is under a curse that began with his no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather and has since followed generations of Yelnats. Now Stanley has been unjustly sent to a boys' detention center, Camp Green Lake, where the boys build character by spending all day, every day, digging holes exactly 5 feet wide and 5 feet deep. There is no lake at Camp Green Lake, but there are an awful lot of holes. It doesn't take long for Stanley to realize there's more than character improvement going on at Camp Green Lake. The boys are digging holes because the ward is looking for something. But what could be buried under a dried up lake? Stanley tries to dig up the truth in this inventive and darkly humorous tale of crime and punishment and redemption. So, I know it's fiction. At first I was thinking it was realistic fiction, that everything could happen, but then it says here, inventive and darkly humorous tale. Usually people use the word tale when there's a little bit of fantasy. So it's something that we should pay attention to as we're reading. I think today we should just jump into the book. It's been recommended. We want to get in this. One more thing too. Mrs. Goodney from LC10 was saying that she loves this book because of the setting of Texas, as well as Mrs. Clifford had mentioned that. Oh, And it just made me think of one more thing too before we get started reading. Each day, one additional thing is going to be added for a learning opportunity for all of our Mitchell Mustangs. So Mrs. Clifford from LC8 has volunteered that she is going to share. She does a reading response every day. Most of your teachers do, but she's volunteered to share her video each day. So after you watch this video, the read aloud, if you want some ideas of how to really craft a wonderful reader's response, Mrs. Clifford's video, short video, will be there every day that you can check into. So it's one more learning opportunity for all of our Mitchell Mustangs. So back to what I was saying about Mrs. Goodney and Mrs. Clifford also. When they found out about this book, they told me the setting is Texas, and that was one of the reasons why they were so excited that this book was recommended. So let's get started. Here we go. All right. As I'm getting started, I'm looking to see, okay, there's no table of contents. Now it's interesting, it has part 1, you're entering Camp Green Lake. And I'm just going to peek and see if I can see how many parts, because, oh, there's 3 parts, because I've looked all the way to the back and it looks like part 3 is just the very, very ending of this book. And I find it interesting that Louis Sachar decided not to title his chapters, because sometimes I use the titles to help me follow the story, but it looks like he just used numbers. So chapter 1, here we go. There is no lake at Camp Green Lake. There once was a very large lake here, the largest lake in Texas. That was over 100 years ago. Now it is just a dry, flat wasteland. There used to be a town of Green Lake as well. The town shriveled and dried up along with the lake and the people who lived there. During the summer, the daytime temperature hovers around 95 degrees in the shade. If you can find any shade, there's not much shade in a big, dry lake. The only trees are 2 old oaks on the eastern edge of the lake. A hammock is stretched between the 2 trees, and a log cabin stands behind that. The campers are forbidden to lie in the hammock. It belongs to the warden. The warden owns the shade. Out on the lake, rattlesnakes and scorpions find shade under rocks and in the holes dug by the campers. Here's a good rule to remember about rattlesnakes and scorpions. If you don't bother them, they won't bother you. Usually. Being bitten by a scorpion or even a rattlesnake is not the worst thing that can happen to you. You won't die. Usually. Sometimes a camper will try to be bitten by a scorpion or even a small rattlesnake. Then he will get to spend a day or 2 recovering in his tent instead of having to dig a hole out on the lake. But you don't want to be bitten by a yellow-spotted lizard. That's the worst thing that can happen to you. You will die a slow and painful death. Always. If you get bitten by a yellow-spotted lizard, you might as well go into the shade of the oak trees and lie in the hammock. There is nothing anyone can do to you anymore. Chapter 2. The reader is probably asking, why would anyone go to Camp Green Lake? Most campers weren't given a choice. Camp Green Lake is a camp for bad boys. If you take a bad boy and make him dig a hole every day in the hot sun, it will turn him into a good boy. That was what some people thought. Stanley Yelnats was given a choice. The judge said, "You may go to jail or you may go to Camp Green Lake." Stanley was from a poor family. He had never been to a camp before. Chapter 3. Stanley Yelnats was the only passenger on the bus, not counting the driver or the guard. The guard sat next to the driver with his seat turned around facing Stanley. A rifle lay across his lap. Stanley was sitting about 10 rows back, handcuffed to his armrest. His backpack lay on the seat next to him. It contained his toothbrush, toothpaste, and a box of stationery his mother had given him. He promised to write to her at least once a week. He looked out the window, although there wasn't much to see, mostly fields of hay and cotton. He was on a long bus ride to nowhere. The bus wasn't air-conditioned, and the hot, heavy air was almost as stifling as the handcuffs. Stanley and his parents had tried to pretend that he was just going away to camp for a while, just like rich kids do. When Stanley was younger, he used to play with stuffed animals and pretend the animals were at camp. Camp fun and games, he called it. Sometimes he'd have them play soccer with a marble. Other times they'd run an obstacle course or go bungee jumping off a table, tied to broken rubber bands. Now Stanley tried to pretend he was going to camp fun and games. Maybe he'd make some friends, he thought. At least he'd get to swim in the lake. He didn't have any friends at home. He was overweight, and the kids at his middle school often teased him about his size. Even his teachers sometimes made cruel comments without even realizing it. On his last day at school, his math teacher, Mrs. Bell, taught ratios. As an example, she chose the heaviest kid in the class and the lightest kid in the class and had them weigh themselves. Stanley weighed 3 times as much as the other boy. Mrs. Bell wrote the ratio on the board, 3-to-1, unaware of how much embarrassment she had caused both of them. Stanley was arrested later that day. He looked at the guard, who sat slumped in his seat, and wondered if he had fallen asleep. The guard was wearing sunglasses, so Stanley couldn't see his eyes. Stanley was not a bad kid. He was innocent of the crime for which he was convicted. He'd just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was all because of his no-good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. He smiled. It was a family joke. Whenever anything went wrong, they always blamed Stanley's no-good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. Supposedly, he had a great-great-grandfather who had stolen a pig from a one-legged gypsy, and she put a curse on him and all of his descendants. Stanley and his parents didn't believe in curses, of course, but whenever anything went wrong, it felt good to be able to blame someone. Things went wrong a lot. They always seemed to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He looked out the window at the vast emptiness. He watched the rise and fall of a telephone wire. In his mind, he could hear his father's gruff voice softly singing to him. If only, the woodpecker sighs, the bark on the tree was just a little bit softer, while the wolf waits below, hungry and lonely. He cries to the moon, if only, if only. It was a song his father used to sing to him. The melody was sweet and sad, but Stanley's favorite part was when his father would howl the word moon. The bus hit a small bump, and the guard sat up instantly. Stanley's father was an inventor. To be a successful inventor, you need 3 things: intelligence, perseverance, and just a little bit of luck. Stanley's father was smart and had a lot of perseverance. Once he started a project, he would work on it for years, often going days without sleep. He just never had any luck. Every time an experiment failed, Stanley could hear him cursing his dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-grandfather. Stanley's father was also named Stanley Yelnats. Stanley's father's full name was Stanley Yelnats III. Our Stanley is Stanley Yelnats IV. Everyone in his family had always liked the fact that Stanley Yelnats was spelled the same frontward and backward, so they kept naming their sons Stanley. Stanley was an only child, as was every other Stanley Yelnats before him. All of them had something else in common. Despite their awful luck, they always remained hopeful. As Stanley's father liked to say, I learn from failure. But perhaps that was part of the curse as well. If Stanley and his father weren't always hopeful, then it wouldn't hurt so much every time their hopes were crushed. Not every Stanley Yelnats has been a failure, Stanley's mother often pointed out whenever Stanley or his father became so discouraged that they actually started to believe in the curse. The first Stanley Yelnats, Stanley's great-grandfather, had made a fortune in the stock market. He couldn't have been too unlucky. At such times, she neglected to mention the bad luck that befell the first Stanley Yelnats. He lost his entire fortune when he was moving from New York to California. His stagecoach was robbed by the outlaw, Kissin Kate Barlow. If it weren't for that, Stanley's family would now be living in a mansion on a beach in California. Instead, they were crammed in a tiny apartment that smelled of burning rubber and foot odor. If only, if only. The apartment smelled the way it did because Stanley's father was trying to invent a way to recycle old sneakers. The first person who finds a use for old sneakers, he said, will be a very rich man. It was this latest project that led to Stanley's arrest. The bus ride became increasingly bumpy because the road was no longer paved. Actually, Stanley had been impressed when he first found out that his great-grandfather was robbed by Kissin Kate Barlow. True, he would have preferred living on the beach in California, but it was still kind of cool to have someone in your family robbed by a famous outlaw. Kate Barlow didn't actually kiss Stanley's great-grandfather. That would have been really cool, but she only kissed the men she killed. Instead, she robbed him and left him stranded in the middle of the desert. He was lucky to have survived, Stanley's mother was quick to point out. The bus was slowing down. The guard grunted as he stretched his arms. Welcome to Camp Green Lake, said the driver. Stanley looked out the dirty window. He couldn't see a lake, and hardly anything was green. Oh, Mitchell Mustangs. What a great start to this story. So we know it's fiction, so we're being introduced to the characters. We're getting to know Stanley Yelnats and this curse, which is fascinating to me. And we're getting to know just a little bit about his personality, that sometimes things aren't so great in school, and things aren't always so great for his family, but they're hopeful. Ooh, I like that. I like hopeful people. Now, the setting. So Mrs. Clifford and Mrs. Goodney talked about how the setting is super important in this book, and we know that it's Texas. So Mrs. Goodney sent a video of an interview of Louis Sachar, and he talked about how he actually, in his real life, he got his idea for writing this story because he was moving from California, the San Francisco area that's very cool and lovely weather, and they moved to Texas, his family. And he says it was just so hot. So I'm wondering about this lake because as the bus drives up, Stanley is noticing there's no green, doesn't look very nice, he doesn't see a lake. So I am thinking, because of the recommendation and because of talking about this book with Mrs. Goodney and Mrs. Clifford, that the setting is going to be really, really important. So I'm so excited. Dr. Skeen and Ms. Bajwa recommended this book. I'm already hooked. I'm already loving it. Mitchell Mustangs, as you are reading your independent reading books, take this time to recommend books that you love to your friends. And maybe you can leave a book on someone's front porch. I know we're social distancing, but a book that you love and you finish a great fiction book, maybe see if your friend would like to read it. That would be a great idea, because I think that if we're going to spend time reading a book, we want to make sure it's a book that we really enjoy, because we don't want to waste our time. So think about that. If you've read a book in the past few weeks, and maybe lend it to a friend. That would be awesome, because then you could maybe talk about the book when you both are done with that. So, Mitchell Mustangs, happy Monday. Thank you so much for watching. The last thing that I want to say to you is stay healthy and happy reading and happy writing. And thank you, and I will see you